Hey guys, it's me coming at y'all with something a little different today. Normally on my YouTube channel, I pretty much exclusively do live streams. I'll stream my progress on the Carabasset or the CNO model railroad or any skin work that I happen to be doing at the time. But today I'm going to be doing something a little different. So I've been making horn sounds and trains for a pretty darn long time now, probably oof, 8 years. Goodness, I'm getting old. Uh, and then somewhat more recently, around 2019 or so, I started regularly making three-part horn sounds with an echo on the tail. And I like to think that I've gotten fairly good at making those horn sounds. And today, what I want to do is I want to teach y'all, kind of show y'all my process on how I go through making these horns, and then show you guys how you can also make your own horns using these same methods. So before we get started, let's go over what you're going to need. So you're going to need Audacity. As you can see, I already have it pulled up. Additionally, you're going to need to go ahead and download all of the available plugins that Audacity offers you, because all these down here do not come in the default package, but I believe they're listed as separate add-ons, and I might have to go back and record how to find all this. But I do make use of some of these tools down here, and especially the high pass, low pass filter, the adjustable fade, and the limiter are all very important to my processes. So you're going to want to go ahead and have all that, and then the only other thing you're going to need is the audio itself. So today the audio I'm going to be working with was very generously provided to me by my buddy Mal. I've actually got several different pieces of audio here. I trimmed this one up last night. He sent me that one a couple of months ago, and he sent me these three bits earlier today. And I think this one here is going to be the one that I'm going to use for this tutorial, simply because it's going to need the least amount of processing, I believe. Because there's some other things on those other audio clips, and if I have time, I'll go back and I'll show you what I'm talking about on them. But there's some other things that I would have to kind of work around. And if I do have time, I will go ahead and show you the methods I would use for working with some somewhat not quite optimal piece of audio. But anyway, we got the equipment out of the way. We've got the audio out of the way. Without any further ado, let's get started. So let's go ahead and start off by just listening to the audio we have. So that's a fairly clean recording right there. This is off of Georgia Northeastern 9706. Sounds like it's got probably some, I guess, what we would kind of colloquially call a second gen, or if you're in more of the horn collector world, I'd probably guess this is in the narrow font range. But it's got a nice K5LA on it. And so the first thing that you're going to notice is this isn't especially loud. It's fairly ramped down right through here. And the second thing you'll notice listening to it, you can kind of hear an engine rumble in the background. So those two things are going to be the first things that we address. So I'm going to go to my effects first of all. Oh, bloody hell, forgot that I've updated my Audacity. So we're going to go ahead and amplify this. Now what this is going to do is it's going to make this whole thing bigger. Now you notice that the meat of the recording is still fairly close to the middle, so usually what I'll do is I'll hit it with a limiter, limit down to -5 decibels, just do a soft limit on it, and then we'll amplify it again. I like to set it to 4.99, that way it doesn't give me the red lines because that just bothers the hell out of me. And now you can see that this is a lot thicker. Now, you do kind of have to be careful with the limiter. I usually don't recommend doing it more than once, period, and sometimes not doing it at all in general, because if you do it too much, it will affect the quality of your audio. But that said, now that we've amplified it up, let's give it a listen. I'm going to adjust my desktop audio just a little bit so it doesn't blow you guys away. Let's listen to it without the limiter. I think we'll be okay with the limiter on for this one. Maybe not. It sounds like it's got more of a warble to it with the limiter on. Nah, it's just being amplified by the fact that it's all louder. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Effect. Now you can either use, for this next step, so we're going to tackle that engine rumble in the background. So normally your engine rumble, especially on GEs, less so on EMDs, but generally speaking, it's going to be very bassy. It's going to be low in the frequency range. So, and usually your horn frequencies don't start until around the 250 mark um, on the very low end. So you can usually filter a lot of it out without hurting your horn at all. I personally prefer to use filter curve just because it's a little bit more visual. So we'll go ahead and flatten this. And so we'll go down to Manage, Factory Presets, and then we'll introduce a bass cut. And what this will do is this will cut out a lot of our bass. Now I'm going to modify my curve a little bit here. I'm going to drag it back to about probably the 210 mark, 220 mark. And I'm going to take this point here, make it a lot steeper. And I'm going to drag it way on down here so it cuts it out as much as possible. And then we'll hit OK. We'll do an adjust amplification here. And now let's listen. So we've cleaned a lot of the noise out. I'm actually going to go back to before I did the limiter, and I'm going to apply it here. I think this will actually help me keep this a little cleaner. We got a little bit of noise in kind of the upper range of this. You can kind of hear. Let's plot our spectrum here and see if anything stands out. So this here is like the main meat of our horn here. And all this crap is, the high end is necessary, but it's not like, ultra necessary. So I'm gonna see, let's see here, treble cut. I'm gonna see if I can filter some of this off without hurting my horn too bad. It's amazing, like even lopping off stuff that you can't really audibly hear because it's effectively just super high pitch white noise. It's amazing how drastically that does still affect it. Like it sounds almost like someone's just kind of walking around with their keys clanking. And I don't think there's going to be a whole lot I can do about that without hurting the horn too bad. But anyway, now that we've cut the bass out, I'm going to go ahead and do my limiter trick now. Let's see what we got. Alright, so normally for me, something like that, the keys there would be almost a deal breaker because I like to keep my audio super duper clean, but I think for the sake of this tutorial, I can deal with it. So now we can go through and start processing the audio further. So let's go back to the start here. So we have a little bit of an unnecessary like tab here. So we're just going to go ahead and chop that off. And then we'll do a fade in to help that sound a little bit more cleaner when we get it in Trainz. So now. And you can see that that does help it pretty drastically. And then let's go over here to the tail end. So I think for this, I'm just going to do a studio fade out, and that should take care of that. There we go. That's nice and clean back there. So now we're going to get into the echo generation, and this is a big part of what, takes these sounds and makes them sound just absolutely massive in Trainz. You're blowing by and you have these big, powerful echoes in the background. So I'm going to take the tail end with a little bit of the blast, and I'm going to copy all that. We're going to copy it over, and just so the way I did that is just copy, click outside of this box here. So I'll do it again real quick. So Control C, copy that, click outside, paste, and it'll open up a new track. So now I'm going to cut this and I'm going to paste it a little bit closer to where I want it to actually be. I'm going to go ahead and mute the horn so I can focus on what I have here. So depending on how much of a tail I have depends on how much I want to process this. So let's listen here. So we have roughly a second of tail, which is not bad, but not ultra optimal either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a pulse stretch. And what this is going to do is it is going to take the audio and stretch it out and give me more material to work with. It doesn't sound super clean when it comes out of the pulse stretch, but because we're using this to generate an echo, it doesn't matter too much. It does matter in some cases. It can really affect the cleanliness of your echo, but for this, I think we'll be okay. So I have it set to a stretch factor of 2.5 and a time resolution of 1/4 second. So we'll hit OK. And now you can see we have a lot more material to work with. And I think that there should be just fine. So I don't really want any of this now, because that's kind of just surplus to requirements. And that's why I copy a little bit extra, is to ensure that I have enough material to do these pulse stretches the way I want to. So we'll go ahead and delete that. And then from here, I'm going to do about there, I'd say. I'm going to go to my adjustable fade. So I have set, so this is, we're going to go for S curve up. So it's going to start at 0 and it's going to curve up to 100%. I have my mid fade adjust set at 18%. I find that this is a pretty good number. It gives me a good result. Percent of original, and I don't have any of these presets. It's not really necessary, so we'll hit OK. And now that'll fade in and then fade back out. So we'll go. And that'll be helpful later on when we're doing our echo work. And speaking of the echo work, let's go ahead and get that set up. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to here. I'm going to go to generate. Then I want to generate silence. We'll just hit OK. Do the merge to get that on there. And then we're going to do the same thing on the back end. I usually select a lot more material than actually necessary, just to ensure that my echoes have the opportunity to get their full potential before fading out. Because if you do it too short, the echo will get cut off. So I'll generate silence on this back end as well. And now I'm going to highlight the whole thing. So the first step in my process for doing the echo, now that we have kind of the material that I want to sculpt this echo out from made, is I'm going to go to Effect and Echo. Delay time of 0.55 and a decay of 0.1 usually works pretty well. However, depending on your recording, how short the audio you have is and how quiet it is, you might want to set it up a little bit differently, because you don't really want it to have a visible ba 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 ba. You don't want it to be able to hear the start and stop in it. You want it to sound continuous, because if it doesn't sound continuous when we go to apply reverb here in a bit, it's going to sound really, really rough. So we'll hit OK. Let's listen to this. You can hear a bit of the start in there, but for the most part, it's not super noticeable. You can kind of hear that wah in it. So I'm gonna undo my echo real quick. And I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna shorten it up just a little bit. We'll do 0.45. And notice how you can't really feel the start in there anymore. And that's just kind of what you have to do. Like having a standard number to start with is always a good thing. But usually with horns, you kind of have to feel it out on a case by case basis. And it's the same for whistles, it's just that whistles are harder to loop. So now that we have our echo on here, I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste it so I have two identical versions of this track. And now we're going to use the Reverb tool to make this sound really, really big. So I have a user preset. So this is my dry echo. So I have my reverberance set at 80%, pre-delay 15, which is default. Room size, I think default's at like 60. You're gonna go ahead and max that out. So damping set 65, tone low 40, tone high 60. So in reverb, I was reading on this. One of the things that I read about is usually your low tones in an echo are actually going to fade quicker than your high tones. So as you can see, I've set up my tones accordingly. Then I have my wet gain set to 2, my dry gain set at -1, and then this is just the default number. So let's hit OK and see what we got. That's pretty nice, ain't it? Alright, so I actually want this to sound a little bigger, so I'm going to undo this. And I'm actually going to set my reverberance up to, I think we'll go 95. And I'm going to reduce my damping just a little bit so that it doesn't fade out as quickly. Now let's hear it. And that's pretty nice, but we can make it better. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my other audio sample and I'm going to do reverb again, except this time I'm going to check the wet only box down here. I'm going to adjust my dry gain to be 2 now, and I'm going to adjust my wet gain to be -1. Don't ask me why this works because I don't know either, but this is how I have been setting it up for more than a year now. So we'll do that. We'll hit OK. And that doesn't really sound as impressive as this. But when you put them together, it sounds massive. So let's unmute our main horn now and let's see how it all sounds together. All right, so listening to it, we have a little bit too much horn left in the main reverb here. So what I'm going to do to combat that is I'm going to take this first little section here and I'm just going to chop it off and then drag this out just a smidge, effect. We're going to do S curve up again. Now let's listen. So that's pretty fat. So what I'm going to do now is I want to amplify it. I don't want to amplify it all the way, but I want to give it a little bit more punch. So I'm going to do that, and then I want to adjust it ever so slightly backwards, because that's going to make it easier here in a second. Now the trick to get these to transition smoothly is to go to Effect and Crossfade Tracks, and that'll automatically taper both of our tracks so that they transition smoothly into one another. I think I actually don't want to move these back. Hang on. Undo time shift. So let's do this. Also, here's my settings for the crossfade because I kind of rushed through that a second ago. 0.38 on my custom curve. I have it set to constant power 1, automatic fade direction. Occasionally you have to manually set the fade direction, but most of the time it's smart enough to figure it out on its own. So we'll do that. And that is a fairly complete sample if you ask me. Now you can do some other tricks to make the echo sound even bigger if, you know, God forbid you need it to sound bigger. Or in some cases you find that your main echo is actually really thin and you need to beef it up some. So basically you can copy paste this, like have 4 copies instead of 2, and then you can do a different set on your reverb for each one. Usually I have 2, if I'm going to do that, I'll have 2 louder ones like this, and then I'll have a further 2 quieter ones down here, which aren't going to be as noticeable, but will help fill in the background. But so we've got this pretty well put together at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save my project. Let's see here. Desktop. Where's my dot? There we go. TBS sounds. What K5LA am on this point? This will be 2nd Gen 8. I personally like to keep a folder just full of all of my audio projects. For starters, it's good practice in case, you know, your PC decides to crash for no reason whatsoever. It's also good if when you get it in game, the horn doesn't exactly sound like you really want it. You can go back to your main audio file and recut it or reprocess it or what have you. But now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to Tracks, Mix, and we're going to hit Mix and Render. And that will mix all this into a single track for us. So now I'm actually going to use my adjustable fade to make this transition a little better. So I'm going to go to adjustable fade, S curve up. Instead of starting at 0 though, I'm going to start at 100. And I want this to end at 130, not 1300. Holy shit. So we'll do that. And then we'll go drag that back out. Mouse curve down. Same settings. It didn't really work, did it? Let's try a different interval. Do like here. There we go, and you can see it has a nice, much more clean taper out. So let's give this a listen. That's nice. All right, so the first thing I always do when I am cutting a horn is I take the whole thing, I'll export it as a WAV, and I'll just label it as horn. And what that'll do for me is that will have basically a preview blast of the horn in the files. It's good to have. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first 2 seconds of the horn. So you can go down here as well and adjust the length of your, I have it set to start and length of section. So since I'm at start at 0, I can hit 2 and it'll copy the first 2 seconds of my audio. I'm going to go back and select the track again. You can see I have the yellow highlight now. And I'm going to go to export, export selected audio. Make sure that this is set to WAV. If it is not set to Microsoft Waveform, it will not play in Trainz. Set it to WAV. Also, in general, if you're like converting let's say you have a video that you took of a train rolling by and you want to convert it, go ahead and convert it straight to WAV. Don't use MP3 and definitely do not use .ogg. And the reason for that is .mp3 and .ogg are both super compressed file formats, whereas .wav is relatively uncompressed. It does mean your file size is going to be a little bit bigger, but it also means that your audio isn't going to be compressed. You're going to have the full quality. You're not going to lose any quality due to compression. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as start. That's the Trainz default for the beginning of your 3-part. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. We're going to come back to the start in a little bit, but I want to go ahead and get the rest of this audio cut up real quick. So now I'm going to go back down here. I'm going to go to my 2, and I'm going to select this to 1.55. Now, do not ask me why, because quite frankly, the reasons are unknown to me, and as far as I'm aware, literally everyone else. But Trainz 3-part sounds, the start.wav is not used after the first 1.55 seconds. At 1.55 seconds on the dot, it transitions from start to the loop. So we're going to go ahead and select it down to 1.55, and we're going to delete it. Now we're going to go to our tail. Now for the tail, you want to have just a little bit of the main horn blast in there because that'll help with the transition when you go from idle to end. So let's see what we got here. And also I'm just hitting the space bar here to stop my audio, which is why you don't see my mouse moving. Also to loop play, it's shift space. So when you're doing your looping, that is really helpful to know. But I think, honestly, we probably have enough right about here. So I'm going to... You notice how there's like a little bit of a dip in our waves right here? No. Well, we're gonna sit right here around the 3-second mark. So now I'm gonna zoom in a little bit, and I'm actually gonna try and do myself a bit of a favor here. I usually, when I'm looping, I like to loop off of peaks. It makes it nice and easy for me because peaks are very recognizable. So I'm going to start my selection right here in the middle of the peak. And this selection will yeet this when I go to delete it. So we're going to take this and we're going to go ahead and stretch this out a little bit and zoom out some more. And I'm going to take it from that peak there where I selected it all the way to the end. And then I'm going to hit export selected audio, and we're going to name this stop. And stop is the Trainz nomenclature to know that this is the stop sound for your horn. Hit save. Okay. Bye-bye. So now we have the meat of our horn. This is going to be the loop. And the reason why I cut it on that peak is hopefully when I make my loop here, hopefully it'll loop cleanly. It never does because K-horns are bastards, but the hope is there. So we're going to copy this, the whole thing. We're going to drag it out so you see that yellow line there, and then we're going to hit paste. And then I'm going to go to Effect, and reverse. And that should provide us with a good clean loop. So let's play. That never happens. So as you can hear, there was no clicking here at the junction point, which means that little extra time that I spent clipping the stop portion of the horn has now paid off here because there's no click here in the middle of my loop. Now that said, there is still clicking at the ends of my loop, so I'll start back here. You hear that little bit of a click? So now I'm going to show you another trick that I like to use on my horns for when I have clicks at the start and end of my loop, because usually you have a lot less control over the start and the stop of, well, the start portion of your loop, because that's where the 1.55 second marker comes in. And that is super annoying. But the way I usually get around that, and there's multiple ways you can do this. You could also actually make your start a little longer than you need it, like have some quilling or something in there. And then you just don't do your fade in until you're ready. But basically have more start than what you actually need, and then go back and select your peak when you're selecting your start, copy out 1.55 seconds of it, and then delete the extra and do your fade in, and you can get around it that way too. But the way I choose to get around it is I just take my loop and I copy paste it. And now I can go in here and I can figure out what's going on. All right, so you can see here we got a little bit of a ridge here. Yeah, usually audio doesn't like that too much, so I'm going to go to about here and we're going to see if we can't get rid of it. And this is the least glamorous part of horn making, by the way. It's just trying to get it to loop properly. So another thing you can do is if it looks a little ragged, you can go to Effect and Repair. Not that it actually did anything there, but if it looks a little rough, you can do that. However, if there is a pop, it'll usually make it sound worse. So the reason why I copy and do the loop twice is because now I can go in and I can edit out the popping at the junction between the end and start of the loop without actually modifying the start of the loop and affecting how it interacts with the start of the horn sound. And now you can see that the total loop is over 12 seconds long. And, you know, usually I say that 9 seconds is about the cutoff. But usually people don't blow the horn for that long. And, you know, if they do, then, well, you're a foamer, and I'm sorry. It's the truth, and it hurts. But by making the loop super long, usually people aren't going to actually blow the horn long enough to hear the click between this and this, because it's still there. But I'm removing it here, so that as you continue to play, like, say, a really nice, meaty 9-second long horn blast, you're still not going to pick it up, because it would normally be at 6 seconds, but now it's not. Like, if you go through a lot of my horn sounds, and if you play them for long enough, eventually you will hear a pop in it. And that's, you know, a sign that I was using this trick here. But let's play this and see what we got. Still a bit of a pop there, so we're gonna zoom back in. Where's my loop point? Right here. Alright, so that didn't work, so we'll try the next peak. Another looping tip as well, if you're having a lot of trouble with your peaks, the actual best place to do it is to find a place where one of your peaks basically comes up to the center line here, because there's very little sound being played at that moment, so it's a really excellent place to loop. Like when you're making engine sounds, that's actually where you want to loop. But for horn sounds,
I personally find it produces a little bit of a better result to do it in the peaks, because when you do it at the center line, it can, depending on how you do it, it can create a bit of a dead spot in the horn and it sounds a little rough. So I've cut it down to that peak there, so let's see what we got now. Still doing it. So this time I'm just gonna kind of go ham. I'm gonna take this big old chunk here out, and then I'm gonna zoom back in, and you can kind of see what we got here. I'm actually gonna do it in a valley this time. You can do it either off of peaks or valleys. Boom. So now that's still looping properly, but I took out a big chunk that could potentially be problematic, and let's play. And there's no popping. So this loop is good to go. And you can still hear the pop at the end, but there's not really much you can do about that. So now I'm going to export as a WAV because we want the whole thing anyway. And we're going to name this idle 1, which is what Trainz recognizes as a loop. So now we don't need this anymore. We can go ahead and close this down, minimize all my other pieces of audio. And now let's return to the start, because I mentioned that we would. So like I mentioned earlier, the idle kicks in at 1.55 seconds, and as you can see, we have a bit too much audio here, and that's going to overlap and sound really bad. However, in Trainz, for some unknown reason, the horn sound, like how it plays, is directly impacted by the frame rate for some reason. And so if you cut it off at exactly 1.55 seconds, occasionally you'll have a jump, and that sounds super jank, and we don't want that. So I've got it selected to the very end here. I'm going to start my selection at 1.55. I'm going to type it out just to make sure I'm exactly on the money. And then I'm going to go up to Effect, Adjustable Fade, S-curve down. We want to start at 0 and end at 100%. And hit OK. I'm going to hit Control R, which will repeat that effect. I'm going to hit that 2 or 3 times. And what that'll do is that'll give just a little bit of that loop, because this is, from here on is all loop material. It'll give a little bit of that loop and it'll quickly fade out so that Trainz doesn't really hold on to it. But if you have a frame rate drop, this will cover the gap, and it helps give you smoother transitions on your horn sounds. So now that we have that there, we can just export audio, start, yeah, go ahead and replace it. And now we are done with the audio. So now the only thing that remains to be done is to set it up in Trainz. So I'm going to go to my horns. And let's see. How is it set up right now? Oh, my names are backwards. Alright, so Nathan, K5LA, second gen, 3 part 7 was the last one I did. So Control D to duplicate this. And feel free to duplicate my horns as well. It doesn't really matter. So now I'm gonna copy the horn off, replace it. So now this is the new kind of preview bit. And then you'll have your config. This idle one here, don't touch unless you want to change the bell. This is your bell sound. So in this particular case, I have a nice, I think that's a gram white steel bell on it. So we'll go to horn, and this is where the 3-part components of your horn are kept. So I'm going to go ahead and cut paste these off my desktop here, replace them all. And now all of your audio has been put into the horn. So I'm going to change this to 3-part 8. You'll have your own nomenclature. You can change that to whatever. I have it set to 3.4. So category class, YD, horn sound. This will all be done for you if you just copy it off of one of mine. Author, that's me, contact email, backshop, blah, blah, blah. There's your license and all that crap. So we'll save this, close, close. We'll go back here. And I don't have to search for this because I can just click on this, Control Shift E, and it'll commit my asset. So now I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go find something to put this on, and we can go test it in Trainz. Installed. I just picked up the I just picked up a shiny new CSX GP40 yesterday. I think this is the new one. Is it the new one? Ah, this is a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and slap a shiny new horn on it. So horn sound. Just delete the name off of the end there. So you have the QID. Then Control C, and I'm going to go replace that down here. That's the shell. I think that was the horn. Or was it? Hang on, let's undo real quick. Oh, God, bloody hell. And it is important to note what the QID of the horn is. So the horn was 541. Okay. Go down here, 541. Replace. Save. Commit. Wait a couple of years for Trainz to commit this. Still waiting. Come on. There we go. What do you mean there's an error? Due to file access error, have you considered going and fucking yourself? Try again. There we go. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and start the game. I have my little test track set up. This is my own personal skybox, so whenever you see me take renders, this is one of the skyboxes that I use. And I have several variants of effectively the same thing that all display the same stuff, just different colors, light effects. Boy howdy, this sure is taking forever. Alright, so CSX. I'm guessing this is the new one. It certainly looks new. It sounds new. This is the new CSX Jeep40, so go ahead and hide all that. There's your bell. That sounds pretty darn good if you ask me. We'll zoom out a little bit so you can hear it a little more clearly. So you hear we have a nice smooth transition from start to loop, and we have a nice powerful echo. And there you go. So that's just me tapping on the H key, and that's why you keep the ends short. It gives you just enough horn material to do a transition smoothly, but not so much material that like a half a second tap on the horn key turns into like a 3 second long burst. I will tell you what, I am pretty darn happy with that. So, from here on, I will package this up and I'll throw it in the Discord for everyone else to enjoy. And then at the end of the year, inevitably, it's supposed to get thrown up on the website. Whether or not it actually gets thrown up on the website is, kind of out of my hands, especially since we don't have a website right now. But anyway, I appreciate all of you for sitting through this almost 46-minute long video. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and if you have any suggestions for something for me to do in the future regarding horn sound making, please, by all means, let me know. Thanks for watching.